Hey folks, welcome to your weekly update with me on the Homestead. This is for June 6th through 10th. We didn't do a weekly update last week because the weather was insane. We just couldn't shoot, and we might be getting that again right now. It's been a beautiful sunny day all day today, and now this is rolling in. So I'm going to try to do this as quick as possible. We're going to go through a lot of stuff because I've done a lot in the last couple weeks. And just a reminder, if you want to see where I'm at daily, you can head over to fromthefield.tv. I post every single day. So there's been about 10 vlogs since the last time we did this on YouTube. And of course, all of those videos are a lot more detailed. I'm just going to show you an irrigation system I built. There's a whole video on that. A bunch of new irrigation stuff I did, whole video on that. The food forest we're going to look at, whole video on that. So there's a lot of stuff here. So yeah, again, you can head over to fromthefield.tv if you want to see all of my daily vlogs, and you can sign up for 7 days for free with no commitment. And if you're not happy after 7 days, you can cancel, no problem, you won't be charged. All right, so with that, let's go and check it out. We're going to start right on the bottom section of my property. So we're on 40 acres here, and the interior 8 acres is fenced. We've got an 8-foot high tensile electric fence around our primary 8 acres. So we're on the bottom, the low side of that, and we're going to walk up and go through everything that I've done over the last couple weeks. And I've been by myself. I've been working by myself for, I think it's been a month now, and it's kind of been cool actually. It's reminded me of the old Green City Acres days when I was urban farming and just hustling and suffering through it, but learning a lot. And so I'm kind of having that again. So it's been really cool. So right up here this is the beginnings of an orchard. And I just did 2 rows along this path here. And this is all apple trees. It's mostly apple whips. So these are Gala apple whips that I actually took from my co-op farm in Kelowna, which also has an organic apple orchard on it. So these were just whips that were coming up, and these will eventually just be used to graft something onto. So they're coming in as just a preliminary root stock to form the base of a tree, and I'll eventually graft other types of apples on them, because I don't actually know if they will be galas. They are grown next to galas, but sometimes when galas come up from whips, they hybridize, or they turn into something that you don't expect. And so that's okay, but we'll graft on them. And so we got 2 rows here, 6-foot spacing between the trees. And what I've done is I've also interplanted watermelons and cantaloupes in between every tree. And we've got a nice elderberry tree here too, actually, which we have 28 of these on our property that were just here when we came. So I'm trying to encourage those to grow. And when I irrigate this, I'll also irrigate this tree. So let's head up. And so these are all 1 or 2 year old, I think they're 2-year-old whips. And I've also purchased some larger Gala apple trees. These are a 3 or 4 year tree. And so once these whips, like probably next year, I'll be taking cuttings of these onto these whips, and then I know I'll be getting a Gala. And so that's our strategy there. I've got a 3-foot wide landscape fabric over top of all of this, because this area here is actually one of the densest pasture areas on the property, and it was really difficult to plant these trees in here. I didn't use any machinery, I did it all by hand, and I used my old tree planting shovel, which I've probably planted 1 million trees with. And if you want to see how I did all this, it's in the vlogs. But essentially, what I'm doing up here for most of my trees is I'm burying them with a 1/4-inch hardware cloth. That is to keep the field mice from going at the roots, because that has a tendency to happen up here. My neighbors have had it happen to them. And so I thought I'd be overly precautious, though I've been killing these things for the last year. And I think I got a good head on them because I haven't seen any in a while, but I'm still doing it just to be careful. So that's why that's there. I think it's almost about 40 trees here on both sides combined. And then we've got our interplanted melons in there. There's some cannabis in there too. I'll continue to mow this section in here. And then eventually I might take this off, but it's mostly here right now just to keep the pasture grass from over competing with the trees. Perhaps I'll do something else with it at another time, but right now it's just going to help get these trees established and also keep that ground covered and keep some of that moisture in the ground as well. So let's head up to the my first field block up here, and a lot's happened up here as well. So not much has happened with the chicken coop. We've done a few little things here and there, and this is not my field of expertise. I'm learning. My wife's spearheading most of it, so I won't bother trying to talk about this like I'm an expert in it, which I'm not. But I have planted blackberries around this. Eventually, we're going to put a more permanent fencing around this, and our plan with chickens going forward over the following years is to have less layers and more meat birds. So we have a lot, these are all a dual purpose bird, and we've got about 38 or 42 of them, something like that. And I think what we'd rather have is a group of layers, like maybe 10 to 15 layers, and then we have meat birds that we move on pasture. That's going to be our plan. And so we'll make this area more permanent. I'll put more straw or sawdust or chips down here, whatever I can get that's local and easy and that the chickens like. And we'll keep the layers in this area. But I've planted blackberries around this because I am going to build more of a semi-permanent fence around here. I might put a netting over top of it as well. But I've got blackberries in there to trellis up whatever I build in here eventually when it's done. We're starting to do more permanent to semi-permanent infrastructure upgrades on the property. So starting to put in more faucets and things like that. In some parts, running lines underground and getting more infrastructure at a semi-permanent or permanent level as I firm up exactly what happens in a particular spot. So up here will be an example of that when we go look at it. But you know, because we're under construction here and there's so much going on, I don't really want to put too many permanent things in places if that place is going to get moved around, if the earth is going to get shaped there more, or I have to dig there more. So that's what's held off from doing a lot of those things. But we're starting to do them as we firm up. Okay, this is definitely the egg laying area. Okay, this is definitely my garden. You know, the buildings obviously speak for themselves, but there's still a lot of shaping to do on the earth up here. And so that's why you don't see a lot of these types of things all around here just yet. But if we go up to the garden plot, so we're up here in field block 1, I'm calling it. And the last time you saw this would have been, I think, the 3rd week of May. And there wasn't a ton happening in here. I still had the plastic on here, which I've repurposed into poly low tunnels. And so this block is all planted out now. We've got 3 beds of carrots interplanted with peas and beans. Those carrots and beans and peas are all popping up now. And then I've got all these beds are potatoes. I've got some red Norland and Warbas, which are early potatoes. And I've got 1 bed of Kennebec in, which is a mid-season potato. But I'll be planting about 3 or 4 times more potatoes as this throughout the season. But this is just my first planting. This is all onions here, onions, leeks, some Spanish onions, mostly red onions. And it's all planted out. I repurposed that poly that I was using to do my stale seed bedding here. And that worked really well. It was a solarizing effect, so I pulled it off and tons of little weeds germinating. I flame weeded at that point and then planted after that. And then we cut that poly down and repurposed it into poly low tunnels to get some season extension on some of these beds. So on some of the potatoes, I've got covering 2 beds just to get those ones a little bit earlier. And same idea with the onions. And on the carrots, it's just going to get these germinating a lot quicker. But just a couple days ago, earlier this week, I put together this irrigation system. So when I planted these potatoes, I put this irrigation down right away, just the lines. But then the next day I came in, and so this is a relatively new system for me that I started doing at the co-op farm in Kelowna. I always used to run a header line through here, and it would just go along there. And what I found with over the years is that when you're turning over beds and you're moving these around, you get a lot less flexibility because you have a rigid line to a rigid line. Whereas here, I've got flex with this. You're basically using an extra T-coupling for every bed, but you get a lot more flexibility. Is that if I want to take this apart, or I want to flip this bed over, I only have to uncouple it in one place opposed to two if I had it done it the other way. And then when it goes back, you know, this bed might end up there and so on and so forth. You got more flexibility because there's more stuff that can move around with this. The other thing I like about this system is I've got optionality. If I want to put an on-off valve between these two T's, I can do that. Then I can turn off any particular bed. And so that gives me some flexibility with it. And my header line comes in, and it actually is somewhat of a flow through. So water comes in and follows the path of least resistance along the headers, and it actually loops all the way around. If you come and see here, the header loops all around. So what actually happens, and I ran this after I set it up, and it worked exactly as I had predicted, is that everything starts filling up at the same time, which is good with drip, because there's sometimes that doesn't happen with drip. You have one area that water goes to first and it stays there the longest, and opposite on the other end. And yeah, if you want to see that whole vlog that I covered, putting all this together in detail, you can do that at fromthefield.tv. That's all there. So from here, let's head up to the greenhouses. So we're here in the passive solar greenhouse, and I did quite a bit of work in here this week. The thing you probably noticed the most is all the trellising. So I had all these crops in here for a while, these tomatoes, these beans, these cucumbers, and I had other stuff to do. So, okay, I'll trellis them later. But basically went up and added a couple more purlins up there so that I could hang trellis string, baling twine really, down. And I've got all of my tomatoes hard pruned and off to a really strong start. And these aren't all my tomatoes. I've got another 90 in the other greenhouse that we're gonna see. But these ones are way ahead. So I have these 8 right there, and I have these guys here. And so that's my early stuff. And that's interplanted with carrots there. I just watered it. That's why they're all laying down like that. But all these beds have filled out really nicely. And so this trellising is great because it'll allow me just to verticalize everything up. And once we go into the shoulder season and I get light under this bed again, I'll have another crop of probably cucumbers for the winter that'll come up and go up to the purlin all the way up here. So we'll have 2 kind of walls of crops in here. That's what's so cool about this greenhouse and having so much headroom that we can play with. So beans climbing up, that's Blue Lake. And then we've got my cucumber strawberry interplant and my cucumber kale interplant. And my kids and I have actually been picking strawberries for over a month now. It's quite amazing when you put strawberries in a greenhouse. But what I did here was an experiment. I wanted to see if I could grow cucumbers anywhere, like within any crop, knowing that I'm going to verticalize it and it'll exit the canopy of the other crop, in which these have done now. So we've got our strawberry down here as a ground cover essentially. And now we've got our cucumbers that are going to the sky, and we did the same with the kale here as well. And so normally, you know, you wouldn't really do this kind of planting because it's a bit too intensive, especially if cucumbers are going to just spread around everywhere. They'll knock everything out. But if you can verticalize them, I can keep a crop on the ground here. And this bed is already being rotated. I cropped out, this was all spinach earlier. That's all cropped out and gone to the chickens. And these other greens in here I'll keep for a while, but I'll be planting probably some excess peppers that I have left over in there. And that's really all that's going on in this greenhouse right now. I've got all my nursery stuff is now out of here, or most of it. And yeah, we'll go check out the other greenhouse. So when you guys last saw this greenhouse, the poly wasn't up. I think I was just doing the bows and maybe some of the first strapping. So this greenhouse isn't totally done, but it's done enough that I've got crops in here and it gets warm during the day. I don't have these doors on yet, but that's okay. This greenhouse still is staying at least 10 degrees Celsius at night. So that's good. My crops are a little bit shocked coming in here. They were sitting in plugs a little bit too long, and they're looking a little bit yellowed is because they're stressed. And so it's going to take a couple weeks for them to work that out, and we'll start to see, in fact, we are seeing some nice new solid green growth coming through the new stuff, whereas the older stuff will get a little bit yellowy. But I've got about 90 tomatoes in here. I've got everything at 1 foot spacing, except on this side, because this is the south. I did this as a 16-inch spacing so that more light could come through on my other crops down here. I got some basil, some celery. I got some leftover cucumbers and peppers down there. I got some cannabis in here as well. But basically it's a tomato house. On this bed back here, I've got about 40 peppers interplanted with the tomatoes. So the greenhouse is, you know, it's operational. I've got all my trellising aircraft cable wires in. I don't have my roll-up sides finished yet, but they don't really need to be operational yet. We're not consistently warm enough that I need to be rolling them up. With the doors open, it's been totally fine. On the end walls, I built a knockout on the top on both of these end walls where I can put another box, and we can channel lock that in, and then I can take that out, or I could potentially put a fan in there if I ever needed to, though I don't think I will. I've given myself at least 4 feet with my roll-up sides, that once we start rolling these up on both sides, especially because this one's higher because of the foundation wall, this greenhouse will ventilate incredibly. And it already does. I mean, we've had a couple days above 20 degrees Celsius, and I had those knockouts. The plastic wasn't in those knockouts yet, and the greenhouse is totally ventilated. It's still got up to 30 degrees, but very, very well ventilated. So I don't think I'll have to have anything mechanical as far as ventilation in here. But I do have, you know, there is the climate battery in here that's 2 feet deep, which isn't that deep for a climate battery. But then we also have our PEX for our radiant thermal floor in here. And once the boiler's installed later in the summer, we'll be going into winter, and we'll be able to heat this greenhouse with water and air. So we come out this way, we'll go check out the food forest. So this is the beginnings of a food forest, and my idea with this area originally, and it might change, but was to preserve the way it actually was when we got here as much as I could, and just plant a bunch of perennial shrubs and trees in here and see how it goes. Last year I had some cannabis in this area, and it worked really well. And I just left the ground as it is. And the ground has got all kinds of beautiful stuff in here. There's lamb's ear, there's miner's lettuce in here, all kinds of neat little alpine plants that are in here. And I like it. I like the way it looks. I want to preserve it. I'm so used to, with farming, with annual vegetables, you got to go in and plow a field and really shape it, which makes sense in that context. But with these kinds of things, you can kind of just use what's there. At least that's what I'm hoping to do. So I've got about 15 Hascap berries peppered around this zone in here. We've got about 10 cherry trees in here. We're actually, we're standing behind, I'm going to be moving the solar panel that's down there to this area here. And so I didn't plant anything too close to behind this. But all these are cherries. And again, my wire cages to prevent the field mice from chewing them up. And I have yet to form a permanent path here, but I'm trying to follow a path in here. And so we've got, this little zone is about I got 3 different varieties of cherries in here. I've got 3 different varieties of raspberries, golden raspberries, everbearing red raspberries, and there's some June berries in here as well. And they're all just kind of peppered around the area. I'll be irrigating this with overhead wobblers, and I'm just going to green the whole area. And I will mow areas of it from time to time. But like I said, I'm trying to just keep as much of this the way it is. Though I've made a little bit of a mess coming in here, and there was a couple trees that I had to bring my mini excavator in to dig a couple holes for because it's rocky on this property. But 95% of these I dug by hand, and that actually worked quite well. The neat thing about this property is I have natural currents. They're not very good, but they're everywhere. Currants and gooseberries. These are, what's this one? I think this is a white currant here. These are planted. Another white currant there. Red and black currants here. That's a red currant. I've planted my goji berries up here. These ones got pretty nuked, though I think they're still alive, but the last time we had a really hard frost, I had these in the greenhouse and they were all cozy in the greenhouse, and I brought them outside and then we had a crazy frost. And so they got a bit shocked, but I think they will bounce back. These particular goji berries, I've moved to 3 different, this is the 3rd property these have been on now. These started on my first flagship plot on my urban farm back almost 10 years ago. And then I moved them to my homestead in Kelowna, the urban homestead, and then they've moved here. Those 2, as well as this one, this goji berry as well. This one is doing a lot better, but this one, the last place this was in, it was in my front yard at my house in Kelowna, which we sold. And then I've got some sea buckthorns up here. A few of them, sea buckthorn, sea buckthorn, sea buckthorn. And yeah, that's about it. I've got a few cannabis plants just peppered around up in here. I'm trying a few different things. I'm trying to grow some in the passive solar greenhouse. I've got some in the greenhouse we were just in, and I've got some peppered around outside to see what works. You know, how do they like to grow best? And cannabis is one of these crops that I've really wanted to integrate into a food forest for a long time, because they produce so much foliage, and especially if you're growing just like a hemp variety, you can chop and drop these plants and throw that residual organic matter on the ground and let it decompose and help build the soil. And once these things are a bit more established here, I'll be running chickens through here as well. But I don't know if I'll be doing that with the birds we have right now. It just doesn't really seem to make that much sense, moving those birds around. Whereas with meat birds, they have a bit shorter of a cycle, and so it's a bit easier to do it. So yeah, I think that is about it. We walked through all the main stuff. And again, like I said at the beginning, if you want to see all of my daily vlogs, I do post every single day except the odd day. I think last week we missed one because of weather, but I do post every day. And so if you're curious about anything in particular, you can head over to fromthefield.tv and check that out. And there is a 7-day free trial. So if you just want to go and check that out, you can do that with no obligation. So we'll leave it there for now, folks. If you liked this video, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and share the videos with your friends. And I'll see you in the next one.